Standing in that courtroom, watching my father's smirk, as Judge Patterson nodded along to every word he said, I felt my world crumbling. Dad wanted everything. The business I built from nothing, the house Mom left me, even my savings. His lawyer painted me as an ungrateful son who owed his father everything. The judge, Dad's old college roommate, barely looked at my evidence. Then I leaned forward and whispered 2 words to my attorney. Judge Patterson's face went white. The courtroom fell silent. Everything changed. 6 months earlier, life felt good. My custom furniture restoration business in Portland, Oregon, was thriving. I had spent 5 years building it from scratch, after finishing community college, turning my passion for woodworking into something real. Every morning, I walked into my workshop and felt proud. The smell of sawdust and wood stain, the satisfaction of bringing broken pieces back to life, watching clients' faces light up when they saw their grandmother's table or their grandfather's chair restored to glory. This was mine. I created it with my own hands and determination. But 8 months before that courtroom nightmare, everything shifted. Mom passed away. Cancer took her fast, too fast. 53 years old, and suddenly she was gone. Diana was her name, and she was the strongest person I ever knew. After Dad left when I was 12, she raised me alone. Worked 2 jobs, never complained, always made sure I had what I needed. She believed in me when I said I wanted to work with wood instead of going to a 4-year university. She helped me buy my first tools. She was my anchor. Her will was simple and clear. She left me the family home, a beautiful craftsman-style house in southeast Portland, worth about $400,000. She left me her savings, $80,000 she had carefully put away over decades. She left me her late father's vintage truck, a 1967 Ford that still ran perfectly. To my father, Gerald, she left nothing. Just a sealed letter that I never got to see. At the time, I figured it was her final word to him, private, none of my business. Gerald had been gone for 16 years. 56 years old now. He walked out when I was 12 and never really looked back. Moved to California, remarried twice, sent maybe 3 birthday cards total over the years. He became a stranger. So when he showed up at Mom's funeral, I was shocked. He stood in the back of the chapel, crying, real tears streaming down his face. After the service, he approached me, hugged me tight, and said he regretted everything. Said he wasted years being selfish and stupid. Said he wanted to make amends. I was drowning in grief. I wanted to believe him. I wanted family. So when he asked if he could stay at the house temporarily, just to reconnect and help me through this hard time, I said yes. My girlfriend Jade thought it was a terrible idea. She was 26, smart, worked as a graphic designer, and had great instincts about people. She warned me repeatedly that something felt wrong about his sudden return, but I defended him. People can change, right? Grief makes you want family close. Gerald seemed different. For 3 months, he acted like a changed man. He helped around the house, fixed the fence, cooked dinners. He came to my workshop, expressed pride in what I had built, asked thoughtful questions about the business. We had Sunday dinners together. He met Jade properly, charmed her parents. It felt like healing. Then one evening in late September, I came home early. I had finished a client meeting sooner than expected and decided to grab some files from my home office. I walked in quietly and heard movement upstairs. I climbed the stairs and found Gerald in my office, standing at my desk with his phone out, photographing my business documents and bank statements. Pages were spread everywhere. He was methodically taking pictures of everything. My heart dropped. I stood in the doorway and asked what he was doing. He jumped, startled, then quickly smiled. Said he was just proud of me. Wanted to show his new wife, Patricia, how successful I had become. Said he was bragging about his son. He laughed it off, acted embarrassed, like he got caught being overly sentimental. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. So, I accepted the explanation, even though something deep in my gut screamed that this was wrong. I told myself I was being paranoid, that grief was making me suspicious. The next morning, I walked outside to grab the newspaper and found legal papers taped to my front door. My hands shook as I pulled them down and read. Gerald was suing me, not for something small. He wanted half ownership of my business, claiming he gave me the idea and encouragement that made it successful. He wanted the house, claiming Mom promised it to him verbally before her death. He wanted half of all my personal assets, claiming I owed him for years of missed child support that he allegedly paid but never actually sent. The lawsuit demanded $1.2 million in total damages. I stood there on my front porch, papers trembling in my hands, and felt my stomach drop to my feet. My father had been planning this from the moment he showed up at the funeral. Every kind word, every helpful gesture, every Sunday dinner was a lie. He was gathering information, building a case, playing a long game. And I let him into my home, into my life, into my business records. The man who abandoned us was now trying to steal everything Mom wanted me to have. I immediately called a lawyer. Marcus Webb came recommended by my business insurance company. He was in his mid-40s, straightforward, no-nonsense type, with silver hair and a firm handshake. We met at his downtown office that afternoon. I brought all the legal papers, and he read through them carefully, his expression growing more serious with each page. Marcus looked up at me and delivered the news calmly. The lawsuit was frivolous, he said. Gerald had no legitimate claim to any of it. But frivolous did not mean harmless. We needed to take this seriously, document everything, prepare for a fight. Courts can be unpredictable, especially in family disputes. He explained the process: discovery, depositions, motions, and eventually trial if we could not reach a settlement. He quoted me a retainer of $15,000 to start. The discovery phase began, and that was when things got darker. Gerald's attorney was Donald Kruger, a notorious litigation lawyer from Seattle, with a reputation for aggressive tactics and expensive fees. His retainer alone was $50,000 minimum. I could not understand how Gerald could afford him. Gerald worked sporadic sales jobs, had been married and divorced twice, never seemed to have much money. Where did $50,000 come from? The first deposition happened in November. Kruger was brutal. He twisted every answer I gave, made my childhood sound privileged, made my relationship with Mom sound codependent and manipulative. He asked about every dollar I ever made, every gift Mom ever gave me, every conversation we had about the future. He made it sound like I stole my own inheritance. Gerald sat across the table, stone-faced, never making eye contact with me. The man who cried at the funeral and hugged me tight now looked at me like I was a stranger he wanted to destroy. Kruger produced evidence that made my blood run cold. Old photos of Gerald and me from childhood, pictures I did not even know existed, fabricated stories about his involvement in my life, claiming he visited regularly and supported me financially, forged receipts allegedly showing he sent money orders every month for years. None of it was true, but it looked convincing on paper. I realized Gerald had been planning this for months, maybe years. This was not a spontaneous lawsuit born from grief. This was calculated, strategic, and cold. Marcus discovered which judge had been assigned to our case. Honorable Douglas Patterson, Multnomah County Circuit Court. When Marcus said the name, his face fell. He set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. He explained that Patterson had a reputation in the legal community. He favored old connections and wealthy litigants. He was known for being difficult with younger attorneys and dismissive of cases he personally found unworthy. Marcus said it carefully, professionally, but I understood what he meant. We had pulled a bad judge. That night, I could not sleep. I researched Judge Douglas Patterson online, found his biography on the court website. Graduated from University of Oregon, class of 1991. Member of Sigma Chi fraternity. Practiced law for 15 years before being elected to the bench. I kept digging through old university records, Greek life archives, anything I could find. Then I found it. Gerald Blackwell, also University of Oregon, class of 1991. also Sigma Chi. They were in the same fraternity, graduated the same year. 34 years ago, they were fraternity brothers. I brought this information to Marcus immediately. He rubbed his temples and explained our options. We could file a motion for recusal, asking Patterson to remove himself from the case due to the personal connection. But judges rarely granted such motions unless the conflict was extreme, and filing it would anger Patterson, potentially make him even more biased against us. We were stuck between a rock and a hard place. Marcus said we should proceed carefully, document everything, and hope Patterson would be professional despite the connection. The pre-trial hearing in December crushed that hope. I sat in the courtroom and watched Judge Patterson interact with the lawyers. He was cold and dismissive to Marcus, interrupted him constantly, questioned every motion we filed. But with Kruger, he was warm and friendly. They joked together. Patterson smiled, nodded along to every argument Kruger made. When Marcus tried to submit evidence of Gerald's 16-year absence and abandonment, Patterson denied it on technicalities. Wrong format, not properly authenticated, prejudicial. Every excuse in the book, my business started suffering. Word spread in Portland's tight-knit craftsman community that I was involved in a major lawsuit. Some clients pulled their contracts, worried about instability. New clients were harder to find. My 3 employees, Carlos, Beth, and James, started asking questions. They were good people who depended on those paychecks. Carlos had worked with me for 4 years, was like a brother. Beth was a single mom, supporting 2 kids. James was fresh out of trade school, learning the craft. I reassured them everything would be fine, but I was lying. I did not know if anything would be fine. The legal fees were draining me. $30,000 gone in 3 months. My savings account, the one Mom left me, was disappearing. Jade and I had been planning to get engaged, had looked at rings together, talked about buying a larger workspace to expand the business. Now those dreams felt impossible. She supported me completely, never complained, but I saw the stress in her eyes. This was hurting both of us. 1 week before the trial, I was working late in my shop when my phone buzzed. An email from an unknown sender. No subject line, just an attachment. I almost deleted it as spam, but something made me open it. The attachment was a photo. It showed Judge Patterson and Gerald sitting together at an upscale restaurant, Romano's on Northwest 23rd Avenue. They were laughing, toasting with wine glasses, looking like old friends catching up. I checked the metadata on the photo. It was taken 3 weeks ago, right in the middle of our active litigation. My hands shook. This was ex parte communication, absolutely illegal. Judges cannot meet privately with one party in a case without the other party present. This was grounds for mistrial, for sanctions, for serious consequences. I forwarded it to Marcus immediately, called him, even though it was past 10 at night. He answered, looked at the photo, and went silent for a long moment. Marcus explained the situation carefully. Yes, this was damning evidence. Yes, it proved bias and improper conduct. But we needed more. One photo could be explained away as coincidental, 2 old friends running into each other. Patterson would claim he did not know Gerald would be there, that they did not discuss the case, that it was innocent. We needed proof of pattern, proof of conspiracy. Marcus said he would hire a private investigator, but it would cost money we were running out of. I told him to do it anyway. We had come too far to back down now. Marcus hired Helen Voss, a private investigator with 20 years of experience. She was a sharp woman in her 50s, former police detective, knew how to be invisible. She started surveillance on both Patterson and Gerald immediately. 3 days before trial, while Helen was digging into their connection, everything got worse. I woke up to an email from my bank. My business account had been frozen. I called them in a panic, and they explained that a court order had been filed. Gerald's legal team submitted an emergency motion claiming I was hiding assets and attempting to move money offshore to avoid the judgment. Complete fiction, but the judge granted it. My business account, containing $68,000 needed for operations, was locked. I could not access a single cent. Payroll was due in 2 days. Carlos, Beth, and James were counting on those checks. I tried to explain the situation, told them I would fix it, but the damage was done. Without access to the business account, I could not pay them. I had no choice. I had to let them go temporarily. Promised I would rehire them the moment this was resolved. The conversation broke my heart. Carlos looked at me like I had betrayed him. 4 years of working side by side, and now I could not even pay him what he earned. Beth cried, worried about her mortgage and her kids' needs. James just nodded quietly and left. My reputation in Portland's craftsman community took another hit. Word spread that I had laid off my entire staff right before a trial. People assumed the worst, that my business was failing, that I was unreliable. Clients who had been on the fence about hiring me pulled away completely. Projects I had lined up for the new year evaporated. Everything I built over 5 years was crumbling. Jade's parents, who had always been supportive and kind to me, started expressing doubts. Her father, a retired accountant, sat me down and suggested maybe I should settle, give Gerald something to make this go away. Her mother agreed, said fighting was costing too much, destroying too much. They were not being cruel. They were worried about their daughter's future with a man who might lose everything. I understood their concern, but it stung. The settlement offer arrived the next day. Kruger sent it over with a deadline: accept by tomorrow morning, or go to trial. Gerald would drop the entire lawsuit if I gave him the house, $40,000 in cash, and 20% ownership of my business. Marcus laid it out plainly. Fighting a trial could cost another $50,000 in legal fees, maybe more if we lost and had to appeal. And with Judge Patterson clearly biased, winning was far from guaranteed. Settling would hurt, but losing at trial could destroy me completely. I sat in Marcus's office, staring at that settlement offer, feeling suffocated. Accepting meant losing the house Mom wanted me to have, the home where she raised me, where every room held memories. It meant giving Gerald a piece of my business, letting him profit from my work. It meant $40,000 I did not have without liquidating everything. But rejecting it meant rolling the dice with a corrupt judge and a stacked deck. Helen came through just in time. She found more evidence of the connection between Patterson and Gerald. 3 restaurant dinners over the past 2 months. Always at expensive places. Always just the 2 of them. She found that Patterson's wife and Gerald's current wife, Patricia, were in a book club together, met every other Wednesday evening. The connection was not just old fraternity brothers. It was current, active, and ongoing. This was conspiracy. Marcus prepared a motion for recusal with all the new evidence. Photos, credit card receipts, witness statements from restaurant staff who recognized them as regulars. We had enough to prove this was not coincidence. Patterson could not claim these were random encounters. We filed it the morning of trial, requested an emergency hearing before proceedings began. The night before trial, I could not sleep at all. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my mind. How did I get here? How did my father, the man who abandoned me, manage to turn my entire life upside down? I got up at 3 a.m, went to the home office, and started going through Mom's papers again. I had been through them dozens of times during discovery, but I kept feeling like I missed something. In the bottom drawer of her desk, beneath folders of old tax returns and insurance documents, I found her journals. She had kept them for years, spiral-bound notebooks filled with her neat handwriting. I had seen them before, but never read them deeply. They felt too private, too personal. But now, desperate for anything that might help, I started reading. Most entries were mundane. Notes about her day, thoughts about work, memories about me growing up. But then I found entries from 2 years before her death. She wrote about Gerald contacting her, calling her out of nowhere after years of silence. He demanded money, said he was struggling, and she owed him. She refused. He threatened her, said he would take everything when she died, that he knew how to do it. The entries became darker. She wrote about consulting with a lawyer, about being afraid, about keeping records just in case. I kept flipping pages, and then I found a folder tucked into the back of the journal. It was thin, unmarked, just a plain manila folder. Inside were printed emails, copies of text messages, all from Gerald to Mom. They went back 18 months before her death. The threats were clear and escalating. He wanted money. He wanted the house. He said if she did not cooperate, he would make sure I paid the price after she was gone. And then, in one email, he wrote something that made my blood freeze. The email said, "I know about Patterson. I know what you two did back in college. If you do not give me what I want, I will make sure Sterling finds out everything, and I will use Patterson to take it all in court anyway." I read it 3 times, trying to understand. Mom and Patterson? What did they do in college? What secret was Gerald holding over both of them? I checked the timestamp. The email was sent 14 months before Mom died. She had known Gerald was planning this. She had known he would use Judge Patterson, and she kept this folder hidden, waiting. I grabbed my phone and called Marcus at 6 in the morning. He answered groggily, and I told him to meet me at his office immediately. I had found something explosive, something that changed everything. We had 4 hours before trial started. Marcus and I sat in his office at 7 in the morning, going through the folder page by page. His expression shifted from confusion to shock to grim determination. This was bigger than we thought. This was not just about a frivolous lawsuit or a biased judge. This was blackmail, conspiracy, and something dark from the past. We tried to reach Judge Patterson's clerk to request an emergency meeting, to present this new evidence, and push harder for recusal. The clerk refused, said the judge was preparing for trial, and would not accept any interruptions. Our recusal motion from yesterday had already been denied via email at midnight. Patterson claimed the dinner photos showed nothing improper, just old friends, maintaining social contact, and he saw no reason to step down. The hidden folder with the blackmail email was dismissed as hearsay, since Mom was deceased and could not authenticate it. We arrived at the courthouse at 8:30. The trial was set to begin at 9. The courtroom was already filling up. I saw some familiar faces, former clients, people from the craftsman community, all curious about the drama. This was not a high-profile case by any means, but in our local circles it had become gossip. The son fighting his estranged father in court, a family tearing itself apart publicly. Gerald sat at the plaintiff's table, looking dignified and calm. He wore an expensive navy suit, probably cost more than I made in a month. His posture was confident, shoulders back, hands folded neatly. He looked like a man who knew he was going to win. Kruger sat beside him, reviewing notes, projecting the same confidence. They barely acknowledged our presence. Judge Patterson entered, and we all rose. He was tall, silver-haired, mid-50s, with a commanding presence. He took the bench, adjusted his robe, and looked out at the courtroom with an expression of authority. His eyes passed over me without recognition, without empathy. To him, I was just another case, another morning's work. But when he glanced at Gerald, I saw the smallest hint of a smile, a brief acknowledgement. Kruger's opening statement was masterful, I had to admit. He painted Gerald as a devoted father who had been driven away by a vindictive, bitter ex-wife. He claimed Gerald had always tried to maintain a relationship, had sent money and support, but was systematically blocked. He described Gerald's pain at missing my childhood, his regret, his attempts to reconcile. And then he shifted to the present, describing how Gerald had finally reconnected with me, only to discover that I was cold, distant, and determined to keep him out of the family legacy. Kruger made it sound like Gerald was the victim, and I was the ungrateful villain. He presented Gerald's claims smoothly. The business idea came from conversations they had when I was young, planting seeds that eventually grew. The house was always meant to be shared. Mom had promised it verbally. The financial support Gerald provided over the years deserved recognition and repayment. Kruger's voice was strong, convincing, emotional, without being overdone. I watched the courtroom, and people were nodding. They believed him. Marcus stood for our opening statement. He was factual and clear, explained Gerald's 16-year absence, laid out the timeline of abandonment, showed how I built the business entirely on my own after community college. He explained Mom's will, her clear intentions, the lack of any legal claim Gerald had to any of it. But Judge Patterson interrupted Marcus 4 times during his opening, asked for clarification on points that were already clear, questioned the relevance of certain facts. Meanwhile, Kruger had spoken for 15 minutes without a single interruption. The first witness was Gerald himself. Kruger walked him through his testimony carefully. Gerald described his marriage to Mom, described me as a baby and young child, painted pictures of happy family moments. Then he explained the divorce, blamed it on Mom's controlling nature and her desire to push him out. He claimed he tried to stay involved but was met with hostility and legal threats. He said he sent money orders every month, $250, for years. He said he called regularly, but I was coached not to speak with him. He said he loved me despite the distance, always held out hope for reconciliation. It was all lies. Smooth, well-rehearsed, convincing lies. Gerald was good at this. He made eye contact with the jury box, even though this was a bench trial with no jury. Old habit, maybe, or just good performance. He pulled out emotion at the right moments, his voice cracking when he talked about missing my high school graduation, my college years, the milestones he was excluded from. Kruger showed documents. The forged money order receipts, printed on aged paper, looking authentic. Photos allegedly showing Gerald at my workshop over the years, but I recognized the backgrounds as clearly photoshopped. A picture of him supposedly at my community college graduation, but I knew he was not there. I remembered that day vividly. Mom was there, alone, cheering loudly. Gerald was not there. But the photo looked real enough to fool someone who did not know better. Marcus objected repeatedly. The documents were not properly authenticated. The photos were suspect. The testimony contradicted discovery responses. But Judge Patterson overruled every objection, said we could address it in cross-examination. I felt my frustration building, helplessness setting in. Cross-examination was our chance. Marcus asked Gerald about the 16-year absence directly. Where were you from 2008 to last year? Gerald had an answer for everything. He claimed he was in California, working, trying to rebuild his life, respecting Diana's wishes to stay away while still maintaining connection. He said Diana threatened restraining orders if he showed up, so he kept his distance physically but stayed involved emotionally and financially. Marcus asked about the money orders. Can you provide bank records showing where you purchased these money orders? Gerald said he paid cash, did not keep those records, but the receipts themselves proved it. Marcus asked why none of those money orders ever reached us. Gerald claimed Diana must have cashed them and hidden the money, turned me against him. Every answer was smooth, practiced, designed to make him look like the victim of a cruel conspiracy. Judge Patterson seemed sympathetic, nodding along. When Marcus pressed harder, asking pointed questions about the timing of Gerald's return right after Mom's death, Patterson interjected. He told Marcus to move on, said he was badgering the witness. The tone was sharp, dismissive. I saw Marcus's jaw tighten, but he complied. Lunch recess came. Marcus tried again to approach the bench, to submit our motion for recusal and the folder of emails showing blackmail. Patterson's clerk took the documents, disappeared into chambers, and came back 10 minutes later with a message. The judge declined recusal, maintained that the dinner photos showed nothing improper, and ruled the folder contents inadmissible as hearsay since Diana was deceased and could not authenticate or testify about them. We were blocked at every turn. I sat in the courthouse cafeteria with Jade, unable to eat. She held my hand, told me to stay strong, but I could see the fear in her eyes. This was going badly. Patterson was not even pretending to be impartial. Every ruling favored Gerald. Every objection we made was denied. We were fighting a rigged system, and I did not know how to win. The afternoon session started with a surprise. Kruger called a witness we had not been notified about, Patricia, Gerald's current wife. She walked to the stand, a woman in her early 50s, dressed conservatively, looking nervous. She was sworn in, and Kruger began his questions. Patricia testified that 6 months ago, shortly after Gerald had reconnected with me, I called her. She claimed I sounded angry, hostile. She said I threatened Gerald, told her that he would regret coming back into the family, that I would make sure he got nothing. She described me as unstable and frightening. She cried on the stand, said she feared for Gerald's safety, that I seemed capable of violence. None of it was true. I had never called Patricia. I had never even met her. I did not have her phone number. This was complete fabrication, perjury committed openly in court. Marcus immediately objected, stood up and argued that this witness was never disclosed during discovery, that we had no opportunity to prepare, that this testimony was a surprise ambush. Judge Patterson allowed it anyway. He said it was rebuttal testimony, responsive to points we raised in our case, and therefore permissible. Marcus argued that rebuttal does not work that way, that you cannot surprise the defense with undisclosed witnesses. Patterson overruled him, told him to sit down, said cross-examination would be his remedy. I looked at Jade in the gallery. She looked terrified. Other people in the courtroom were whispering, looking at me like I was dangerous. Patricia was convincing. Her tears seemed real. Her fear appeared genuine. The lie was being believed. Marcus cross-examined her, asked for phone records proving I called. She said she deleted the call log because it upset her. He asked if she reported the threat to police. She said no, because she was scared and did not know what to do. Every answer was conveniently unprovable, but emotionally compelling. Judge Patterson was letting them commit perjury. He was enabling fraud, helping Gerald build a false narrative, and the courtroom was buying it. Marcus put me on the stand next. It was our turn to present the defense, to tell the truth. I was sworn in, sat down, and looked out at the courtroom. Gerald stared at me with cold, empty eyes. No recognition, no remorse, just calculation. Marcus walked me through my testimony carefully. I explained my childhood, the early years when Gerald was present. I described the day he left, how I was 12 years old, came home from school, and he was just gone. No explanation, no goodbye. I talked about Mom working 2 jobs to support us, how she never spoke badly about him but also never lied to protect him. I explained building my business from nothing, the years of learning the craft, the pride I felt in creating something meaningful. I testified about Mom's illness, the cancer that took her too fast. I described her final months, how she made sure her affairs were in order, how she was clear about her wishes. I explained the will, the house, the savings, the truck. I told the truth about Gerald's sudden return at the funeral, how I wanted to believe in reconciliation, how I let him into my home and my life. Then I described discovering him photographing my documents, the sick feeling in my stomach when I found the lawsuit papers taped to my door. I explained how every kind gesture had been a manipulation, how he had planned this from the start. I kept my voice steady, tried to present facts calmly, but the emotion was there. This was my father destroying me for money. Kruger's cross-examination was brutal. He attacked every point, twisted every answer. He asked if Mom had poisoned me against Gerald. I said no. She simply told me the truth. He asked if I wanted her money, all to myself. I said I wanted to honor her wishes. He asked if I refused to let Gerald be part of my life. I said I welcomed him in, and he betrayed that trust. Kruger made my independence sound like rejection. He made my success sound like theft of Gerald's ideas and encouragement. He suggested that I was a controlling, cold person who drove away his own father. He implied that Mom's will was the product of her bitterness, not her genuine wishes. Every answer I gave, he turned into something ugly. Judge Patterson sustained nearly all of Kruger's objections when Marcus tried to redirect. When I tried to explain context, Patterson cut me off, said I was being non-responsive. When I tried to present documents showing my business existed before Gerald returned, Patterson said we would address evidence separately. I felt myself losing ground with every question. Our character witnesses testified next. Carlos, Beth, and James appeared remotely via video link since they had been laid off. They each spoke about my integrity, my dedication to the business, my fair treatment of employees. They praised my craftsmanship and work ethic. But Judge Patterson seemed bored. He checked his watch during Carlos's testimony. He interrupted Beth to ask her to speed up. He barely looked at the screen when James spoke. Jade testified next. She explained how Gerald had behaved during his stay at the house, the red flags she noticed, the suspicious behavior. She described the night I found him photographing documents, how upset I was, how I wanted to believe his explanation. She painted a picture of a man who manipulated and deceived us. But Kruger's cross-examination made her seem like a gold digger. He asked about our relationship, how long we had been together, whether we talked about marriage. She admitted we had discussed engagement. He asked if she was concerned about losing financial security if Gerald won. She said no, she just wanted the truth. But the implication was clear. Kruger suggested she was coaching me, protecting her own interests, not testifying objectively. Marcus tried to introduce Diana's journal and the folder of emails. This was critical evidence, proof of Gerald's threats and blackmail, proof of the connection to Patterson. But Patterson ruled it all inadmissible. He said the journal was hearsay, not properly authenticated without Diana present to verify she wrote it. He said the emails were hearsay and potentially forged. He said even if they were real, they were prejudicial and not directly relevant to the claims in the lawsuit. We were being blocked at every turn. The smoking gun evidence, the proof of conspiracy, was ruled inadmissible on technicalities. The secret about Patterson and Diana, whatever happened in Prescott Valley, remained hidden. We could not use it. We had no weapon left. Marcus gave his closing argument. He was strong, passionate, laid out the facts clearly. He explained that Gerald abandoned his family, had no legal claim to anything, and was perpetrating a fraud on the court. He pointed out the inconsistencies in Gerald's testimony, the suspicious timing, the forged documents. He argued that justice required dismissing this lawsuit entirely. But Kruger's closing was polished and emotional. He painted Gerald as a father who made mistakes but never stopped loving his son. He described the years of pain and separation. He claimed that Diana's will was the product of anger, not reason, and that Gerald deserved his rightful place in his son's life and legacy. He asked Patterson to correct this injustice, to give Gerald what he deserved. Judge Patterson announced he would rule from the bench. No need for written opinions or deliberation time. My heart sank. This was it. No time for reflection, no second thoughts. He had already decided. Patterson spent 20 minutes summarizing the case, and his bias was clear from every sentence. He praised Gerald's courage in reaching out despite years of rejection. He criticized my coldness toward my father. He said Diana's will appeared to be influenced by bitterness and emotion rather than fairness. He said that while some of Gerald's documentary evidence had flaws, the overall picture supported his claims. Then Patterson announced his ruling. Sterling must transfer ownership of the house to Gerald, the property worth $400,000. Sterling must pay Gerald $60,000 in cash within 90 days. Sterling must give Gerald 35% ownership of the business, including voting rights and profit sharing. And Sterling must pay Gerald's legal fees, which totaled $90,000. The numbers hit me like punches. Total loss: approximately $800,000. Plus, I would lose control of my own company. Gerald would own more than a third, could block decisions, interfere with operations, destroy what I built. Everything Mom wanted me to have, gone. Everything I worked for, stolen. My legs went weak. I gripped the table to stay standing. Jade gasped audibly from the gallery. I heard murmuring throughout the courtroom. Even people who had believed Gerald's story seemed shocked by the size of the judgment. This was not splitting assets. This was annihilation. Marcus started to speak, to object. to request time for post-trial motions. But Judge Patterson cut him off sharply. "This is final," he said. "The ruling stands. Bailiff, prepare the orders for signature." His tone was dismissive, absolute. There would be no discussion, no reconsideration. Gerald smiled. Not a big smile, just a small, satisfied smirk. He had won. He had come back into my life, manipulated me, used his connection to a corrupt judge, and stolen everything. Patricia reached over and squeezed his hand. Kruger packed up his briefcase. Job done. I stood there, feeling the room spin. Everything my mother worked for, everything she sacrificed, everything she wanted me to have, was being handed to the man who abandoned us. The man who blackmailed her, who used her secrets against her, who planned this for years. And there was nothing I could do. Then I remembered something. A phrase from Mom's journal. Something she wrote about Patterson, about the past, about Prescott Valley. She had written it in a way that seemed important, like she was leaving me a clue, a key to understanding. I had read it last night, half asleep, and it stuck in my memory. I leaned close to Marcus and whispered 2 words. He looked at me, confused, not understanding. I gestured urgently toward Patterson, insisting. Marcus's eyes widened slightly as he realized I wanted him to say this out loud, to use it somehow. Marcus stood up. "Your Honor, before you sign those orders, my client wishes to make a brief statement." Patterson looked annoyed, impatient. "This is highly irregular," he said. "I have ruled. The case is over." Marcus persisted. "It pertains to Prescott Valley, Your Honor." The change was instant and dramatic. Judge Patterson's face went from annoyance to shock to fear in the span of 2 seconds. The color drained from his skin. His hand, which had been reaching for a pen to sign the orders, froze in mid-air. His eyes went wide, locked on Marcus, then shifted to me. The courtroom noticed. The murmuring stopped. Gerald looked confused, glanced at Kruger. Kruger whispered to him, but Gerald shook his head, clearly having no idea what Prescott Valley meant in this context. Patterson's voice came out shaky. "Approach the bench. Now, both counsel." It was not a request. It was desperation. Marcus and I walked to the sidebar. Kruger followed, still confused. We stood close to the bench, and Patterson leaned forward, his composure completely shattered. "What did you just say?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Marcus, catching on that this was significant, spoke calmly. "My client mentioned Prescott Valley, Your Honor. Does that mean something to you?" Patterson looked at me directly, and I saw fear in his eyes. Real, visceral fear. "Where did you hear that name?" I spoke up, keeping my voice low but firm. "My mother's journal. She wrote about spring break, 1991, Prescott Valley, Arizona. She wrote about what happened there. She wrote about you." Patterson's hands began to tremble visibly. "This is not appropriate for." He could not finish the sentence. I continued, louder now, my voice carrying. "She wrote about the accident, the girl, the cover-up." Kruger interrupted. "Your Honor, I do not know what this is, but this is clearly." He was trying to defend Patterson, trying to shut this down, but he did not know what we were talking about either. Patterson held up his hand, silencing everyone. His face had gone from pale to gray. He looked physically ill, like he might be sick right there on the bench. He called a recess, his voice cracking. He demanded to see Sterling and Marcus in his chambers immediately. Right now, no delays. We followed Judge Patterson through the door behind the bench, into his private chambers. It was a large office, wood-paneled walls, law books lining the shelves, diplomas and commendations hung carefully. Patterson closed the door, locked it, and turned to face us. He was sweating, visibly shaking. He collapsed into his chair and looked at me with desperation. "What do you know? Tell me exactly what you know." Marcus and I sat across from him. I pulled out my phone, where I had photographed the relevant pages from Mom's journal. I handed it to him. Patterson read, his face growing more ashen with each line. I explained out loud so Marcus would understand the full story. In Mom's journal, she detailed a spring break trip to Arizona in March of 1991, 34 years ago. Patterson, Gerald, Diana, and several other University of Oregon students went together. They rented a house in Prescott Valley, a small town north of Phoenix. They were young, 21 years old, partying, having fun. One night, Patterson was driving. He had been drinking heavily at a bar. Mom and Gerald were in the car with him. Patterson was behind the wheel, drunk, going too fast on a dark road. He hit a pedestrian, a 19-year-old girl named Amy Castellano. She died on impact. They panicked. All three of them. They were terrified, drunk, young, and stupid. They did not call the police. They did not call an ambulance. They fled the scene, drove back to the rental house, and tried to figure out what to do. Gerald's family had money and connections. His father was a lawyer with political ties. They made calls, pulled strings, paid people off. The car Patterson had been driving was registered to a rental company under a fake name Gerald's father arranged. They got the car cleaned and disposed of quickly. They paid off local officials to bury the investigation. The case went cold. It was ruled a hit and run with no suspects. Amy Castellano's family never got justice. They never knew who killed their daughter. Mom carried the guilt for 34 years. It haunted her. She wrote about it extensively in her journal, how it destroyed her, how she thought about Amy's family every day. She wrote that it was one of the reasons she eventually divorced Gerald. She could not live with what they had done, and she could not live with the man who orchestrated the cover-up. And Gerald, I continued, used this secret as blackmail. When Mom got sick, when she was dying, Gerald contacted her and demanded money. He said if she did not give him what he wanted, he would expose everything. He would make sure I found out about the accident, about her role in it, and he would use Patterson to take everything in court. Mom refused to pay him. She wrote in her journal that she had already suffered enough, that she would not let him control her anymore. But she also knew he would come after me eventually. So she documented everything. She kept the emails, the threats, the evidence. And she wrote about Prescott Valley, about Amy Castellano, about what really happened that night. She left it for me to find, in case I ever needed to defend myself against Gerald's schemes. Patterson sat there, his head in his hands. He did not deny any of it. He did not claim I was lying or mistaken. He just sat there, destroyed. Marcus, now understanding the full scope, spoke carefully. Your Honor, this is a serious crime. Vehicular manslaughter, fleeing the scene, obstruction of justice, conspiracy. The statute of limitations may have passed on some charges, but not all. And your conduct in this trial, rigging the case in Gerald's favor to protect yourself from exposure, that is, judicial corruption. That is happening right now. There is no statute of limitations on that. Patterson looked up, his eyes red. He nodded slowly. I know. I have known for 34 years. It has haunted me every single day. I became a judge, thinking I could balance the scales somehow, do good to make up for what I did. But when Gerald came to me months ago with proof, with photos from that night that I thought were destroyed, with documents showing the payoffs, I was trapped. He explained that Gerald had approached him last summer, right after reconnecting with me. Gerald had kept evidence all these years, insurance against anyone turning on him. He had photos of the damaged car before it was disposed of, copies of the checks his father wrote to silence people, even a recording of a phone call where they discussed the cover-up. Gerald told Patterson that if he did not help with the lawsuit, if he did not rule in Gerald's favor, all of it would go public. Patterson's career, his freedom, his entire life would be destroyed. So Patterson agreed. He rigged the trial from the start, denied our evidence, allowed Gerald's lies, blocked every defense we tried to mount. He was going to hand Gerald everything, not because the law required it, but because he was being blackmailed. Marcus laid out our options bluntly. We could report this to the state bar immediately. We could contact the district attorney and provide all the evidence. We could go to the media. Patterson would be disbarred, prosecuted for the decades-old manslaughter and cover-up, and charged with corruption for rigging this trial. Gerald would be prosecuted for blackmail, extortion, and fraud. Kruger would be disbarred for suborning perjury, assuming he knew about the scheme. Patterson asked what we wanted. His voice was small, broken. He knew he was finished. He just wanted to know how bad it would be. I leaned forward and looked him in the eye. I want the truth, in open court. I want you to vacate your judgment, recuse yourself, and make this right. And I want justice for Amy Castellano's family. They deserve to know what happened to their daughter. Patterson nodded. He stood up slowly, like an old man, even though he was only in his 50s. He walked to his desk, pulled out a bottle of water, drank it down. He was gathering himself, preparing for what came next. We walked back into the courtroom. Everyone was still there, waiting, whispering. Gerald and Kruger were at their table, talking in low voices, clearly worried. Jade was in the gallery, gripping the bench in front of her. The tension was thick. Judge Patterson took the bench. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. He had made his decision. I need to make a correction to my ruling. The courtroom went silent, every eye on him. I am vacating my previous judgment in its entirety. There will be no transfer of the house, no payment to the plaintiff, no ownership stake in the business. He paused, took a breath. Furthermore, I am recusing myself from this case due to conflicts of interest that I should have disclosed at the outset, but did not. This case will be reassigned to another judge for a new trial if the plaintiff wishes to proceed. Gerald stood up, his face red with anger and confusion. What are you doing? His voice was loud, echoing. Patterson ignored him and continued. I am also referring several matters to the Oregon State Bar and the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office for investigation. These matters involve potential misconduct by multiple parties, including myself. I will cooperate fully with any investigations. Chaos erupted in the courtroom. Reporters who had been casually observing suddenly pulled out phones and started making calls. Kruger grabbed his briefcase and headed for the door, trying to leave quickly. Gerald stood frozen at his table, realizing everything was falling apart. I walked out into the hallway, and Gerald followed me. He grabbed my arm, and I pulled away. I turned to face him. What did you tell him? Gerald demanded. What lies did you make up? I did not make up anything, I said calmly. Mom documented everything. Prescott Valley, Amy Castellano, the cover-up, the blackmail. She left it all for me. She knew you would come after me someday, and she made sure I would have what I needed to stop you. Gerald's face went through a series of emotions. Anger, fear, denial, and finally resignation. He tried to justify himself. I deserved that money. Diana took everything from me. She ruined my life. I stepped closer. You left us. You abandoned your family. Mom died carrying the guilt of what happened to that girl, because you orchestrated the cover-up and held it over her for decades. And you tried to use it to destroy me. You are not a victim. You are a criminal and a coward. Gerald looked like he wanted to say more, but there was nothing left to say. Security was approaching, ready to escort people out as the courtroom emptied. He turned and walked away. It was the last time I ever saw him in person. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. The Oregon State Bar opened formal investigations into Judge Patterson and Donald Kruger. The Multnomah County District Attorney's Office reopened the Amy Castellano case based on the evidence from Mom's journal and my testimony. Judge Patterson resigned from the bench within 3 days. He did not fight it, did not try to defend himself. He issued a statement admitting to serious errors in judgment and saying he would cooperate fully with authorities. His resignation made the local news. Some people were shocked. Others who had appeared before him and suspected bias felt vindicated. Patterson eventually entered a plea deal. In exchange for his testimony against Gerald and full cooperation, he pled guilty to obstruction of justice and judicial corruption. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison, eligible for parole after 1. It was a relatively light sentence, but prosecutors valued his cooperation. He provided documents, recordings, and detailed testimony about how Gerald had blackmailed him and orchestrated the scheme. Gerald was arrested and charged with multiple crimes: extortion, blackmail, fraud, conspiracy, and his role in the original cover-up of the Amy Castellano hit-and-run. The evidence was overwhelming. Mom's journal, the emails, Patterson's testimony, and financial records showing payments to silence people decades ago. Gerald's trial took 8 months. He was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Donald Kruger was disbarred. The state bar found that he had knowingly presented false evidence and suborned perjury during the trial. Patricia's testimony about me threatening Gerald was proven false when phone records showed no calls between us ever occurred. Kruger claimed he did not know it was false, but the bar did not believe him. His law license was revoked, and he faced potential criminal charges for his role in the fraud. But the most important outcome was justice for Amy Castellano's family. After 34 years, they finally learned what happened to their daughter. The district attorney contacted them, explained that new evidence had emerged, and told them the truth. I arranged to meet with them in person. Amy's parents, Robert and Susan Castellano, were now in their 70s. They lived in Flagstaff, Arizona. I flew down to meet them, bringing copies of Mom's journal entries and a letter I had written. Sitting in their living room, I apologized on my mother's behalf. I explained that she had carried the guilt her entire life, that she documented everything because she wanted the truth to come out eventually, that she was sorry for her cowardice that night. Robert and Susan were gracious and kind. They told me about Amy, showed me photos of her, shared stories. She had been a college student, studying education, wanted to be a teacher. She was funny and smart and kind. Her death had devastated their family. For 34 years they had no answers, no closure. Now, finally, they knew. It did not bring Amy back, but it gave them something they had needed for decades: truth. They started a foundation in Amy's name, focused on supporting victims' families and advocating for justice in unsolved cases. I donated $50,000 to the foundation, money from the savings Mom left me. It felt right, like honoring both Amy and Mom's memory in one act. My business recovered gradually. Once the truth came out about Gerald's fraud and the corrupt trial, clients started returning. People in the Portland craftsman community reached out, apologized for doubting me, offered support. I rehired Carlos, Beth, and James with raises. Carlos was hesitant at first, hurt by the layoff, but I explained everything that had happened, and he understood. We rebuilt trust slowly. Jade and I got engaged that Christmas. I proposed in the house, the one Mom left me, the one I got to keep. Jade cried happy tears and said yes. Her parents apologized for suggesting I settle, said they understood now why I had to fight. We started planning a small wedding for the following summer. I kept the house, honored Mom's wishes completely. Every room still holds memories of her, and now it holds the beginning of my future with Jade. The business is thriving again, better than before. I have more clients than I can handle. Hired 2 more craftsmen to help with the workload. The vintage truck from Mom's father sits in the garage, and I drive it sometimes, feeling connected to the generations before me. Gerald's lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice, meaning he could never file it again. He sits in prison now, and I have not contacted him. I do not plan to. Some people asked if I felt bad about what happened to him, if I wished things had gone differently. The answer is no. He made his choices decades ago and doubled down on them. He tried to destroy me for money, used Mom's guilt against her, and corrupted the legal system. He earned his consequences. The lesson I learned from all of this is profound. Mom carried the weight of a terrible secret her entire life, one that happened when she was young and scared. But she documented the truth because she knew Gerald would eventually use it for evil. She protected me even after her death. She gave me the weapon I needed, not for revenge, but for justice. Truth buried does not disappear. It festers and grows, and eventually demands to be acknowledged. Justice can be delayed, and that delay is painful and costly. But justice can still arrive if you fight for it, even when the system seems rigged against you. Family is not just about blood. It is about who shows up, who protects you, who sacrifices for you, who does right, even when it costs them everything. Standing up to corruption, even when judges and powerful people align against you, is the only way to honor those who sacrificed for you. Sometimes, the fight seems impossible. Sometimes you lose ground with every step. But if you hold on to truth and refuse to surrender, if you have even one piece of evidence that can change everything, you can win. 2 words, spoken at the right moment, can topple empires built on lies. Prescott Valley meant nothing to most people in that courtroom. But to Judge Patterson, to Gerald, it meant the end of their conspiracy. It meant accountability for a crime committed 34 years ago. It meant justice delayed but finally delivered. I think about Amy Castellano sometimes, about the life she did not get to live. I think about her family, the decades they spent not knowing. And I am grateful that Mom, despite her own guilt and fear, made sure the truth would eventually come out. She could have destroyed those journals, burned the emails, let the secret die with her. But she did not. She left breadcrumbs for me to follow, and those breadcrumbs led to justice. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a situation where the system seemed rigged against you? Where someone in power used their position to hurt you? How did you fight back? Or did you? What would you have done in my position? Leave a comment below and share your story. Your experience might help someone else who is going through something similar. If this story moved you, if it made you think about justice and family and truth, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss future stories about real people facing real struggles and finding ways to overcome. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who might be fighting their own battle against corruption or injustice. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here, for caring about truth and justice. I hope you never have to face what I faced. But if you do, I hope you remember that even when everything seems lost, even when powerful people align against you, the truth has power. Hold on to it, fight for it, and never surrender. Take care of yourselves and each other. Stay strong, stay honest, and never stop fighting for what is right.